Welcome, I'm Anthony Wilson, the Communications Director for the City of San Angelo. It is the first Tuesday of the month. That means that we had a City Council meeting today, and that means we are here to talk about what happened during that City Council meeting. And so joining us today are two very important fellows. We have the Chief Executive Officer for the City of San Angelo, our City Manager, Daniel Valenzuela.
Thanks for having me.
And we have Councilman Harry Thomas, who is actually added another title today. He was elected by his peers as the Mayor Pro-Tem, but you also took your oath of office today for another 4-year term. So talk a little bit about why you wanted to serve and what you're looking forward to over these next 4 years.
You know, I laid the groundwork in the first 3 years I was on council on a number of different projects, some of which is the Avenue P flooding issue, the Bell Street project, a number of other things that we're working on. And I want to see some of those things through to fruition on this. I always have a funny story that I tell, especially on days like this when we've had a fairly long council meeting. When I ever say anything to my wife about this, she always reminds me, you're the one that wanted this. So we have a little ongoing joke about that. So, but you know, we do have a lot of things going on in the community, and there are a lot of things that we're working very closely with the staff and the citizens on, and I think it's key that we follow through on some of those projects.
And with 3 years experience under your belt, I bet you feel a lot more prepared for what's ahead of you these next 4 years than you may have 3 years ago.
I hope so. I mean, I think I've got a vision now that's probably a lot broader, or maybe even focused on certain projects than I did 3 years ago. I've learned some things. I'm certainly more comfortable sitting up there. I come prepared and ask questions, and I think that's the key to being successful. And I think the other 5 council people and the mayor really are looking out for the best interest of the city.
Now, as I mentioned, you were elected Mayor Pro Tem by the other council members today. A lot of people probably have no idea what the Mayor Pro Tem is or what he does, so why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, really, it's a sit-in for the mayor when the mayor is out of town or can't not be there for other duties. And so that's running the meeting, speaking about the proclamations, helping set the agenda, all of those things that the mayor typically does when she's there. Then that Mayor Pro Tem has to step in. A lot of times you have the Ports to Plains or these trips to Washington to help with things that are going on in the city. And when she's out of town, then the Pro Tem steps in and does those types of items.
So I wanted both you guys here today because I want to talk about 2 really broad topics that are of interest and importance and impact to our citizens. The first one of which is water, and water is, of course, the City Council's top priority among its stated priorities. So today we were talking about water conservation, and one of the things that our Water Utilities Director, Allison Struby, proposed, Daniel, is that we get rid of the current water conservation credits. Talk about why you think that that's a good idea.
It's truly not a conservation program. When it was instituted back in 2006, really what it did is it monitored your volume use of water from 1,000, 2,000 to 3,000 gallons per month. And based on that information, if you use 1,000 gallons per month, and you do have individuals in our community that have a small home, a single individual that for some reason or another, I mean, that's really their only consumption is about 1,000 gallons per month. And really we're rewarding those individuals and other individuals as well that were keeping their volume usage at a lower rate, because that's basically what they used anyway. So they were given a conservation credit, even though they really weren't conserving. That's actually the volume of water that they're using. What made it worse, though, when you got to 2,000, 3,000 gallons per water, you're actually given more credit for the 3,000 gallons of water as opposed to the 1,000 gallons of water, which makes no sense. If you're truly conserving and you're down to 1,000, you should get a bigger credit than the person that actually consumed the 3,000 gallons that month. So what we're trying to do is correct that situation and ensure that what we truly have is a conservation program and not what we had before.
And so it sounds like then the conservation credits were earned more by circumstance than by anything that the customer was proactively doing.
That is absolutely correct. And we want, first of all, we do want to thank our citizens, because the numbers today is really impressive how much our citizens understand the importance of conservation. I mean, you look at the numbers from 2011 to 2018-19, those numbers have dropped off significantly for as far as the consumption by consumer. And it's impressive that our citizens took heed and said, hey, we are in a drought situation, we're in a dire situation, we need to be more responsible with the use of our water. So we're very thankful to our citizens for actually stepping up and saying, hey, we're going to do something about this. It's good enough to pray for rain, but we also have to plan. We also have to make sure that we truly believe in praying for rain, and we received rain, but we also have to plan to ensure that the water is there.
Well, and so the Water Utilities Director outlined this three-pronged approach to this. The first part was providing some assistance for low-income families, so that if they get in some sort of crisis situation where they are unable to pay their bill once a year, they can seek some help through the Concho Valley Community Action Agency. So help for low-income families, help for low-income seniors, where they can get an ongoing lower rate for their first tier of water usage, up to, I think it was $3.54 per month credit on their bills if they're low income, over 65, and use a certain amount of water. And then there was a water conservation program, and this sounded like it was the first step in a program to encourage people to use less water in their homes. And it involves just giving free kits to people with efficient shower heads and aerators that they can install themselves to reduce the usage in their homes. So, Councilman, why do you think this package as a whole was a good idea as far as encouraging water conservation?
Certainly. There are a number of homes in San Angelo that are older homes that have some of those toilets and shower heads and so forth that probably have been in there 25, 30 years. As we know, there are products on the market today that will save water, and having that opportunity to install a saving device ultimately turns into a number of thousands of gallons of water, millions of gallons of water every year that we actually save. So the more people that we can introduce these products to, the better off we're going to be. The shower heads and the aerators really are the greatest opportunity for us to save. Water-saving commodes is another opportunity. Water-saving washing machines, those things that are on the market today will help ultimately help us save some water and conserve that. It also does a little bit about education, and you talked a little bit about a multi-prong approach on this. Even looking at trying to get into the school district and have conversation with the young kids, with the young people. We know that if you can educate those individuals, they typically have more influence on mom and dad and how they run the household. So I think these are all keys to us saving water, which is, you know, one more part of the water plan overall. You can have sources of water out there, but if you don't save them, then the bottom line is that. And I think we're doing a pretty good job of heading in that direction.
Daniel, it seemed pretty clear that there was a desire to help meet the needs of low-income people, whether they're families or whether they're seniors, and to partner with the Concho Valley Community Action Agency in order to administer those programs for those low-income citizens. Why did you favor that sort of collaboration with the Concho Valley Community Action Agency?
The Community Action Agency, when you start looking at what they do, that's the type of work they do. They do screen individuals. They're actually the experts at doing that, not the city. That's not a program that we felt that we could run as efficiently as a community action agency. So we really felt that that was the right approach. Why recreate the wheel when we already have an agency in our community that's doing it really well? You know, and on our part, the City Council, one of our big concerns, especially when you look at our elderly citizens that are on a fixed income, The drop off, whenever you look at the program we currently have, a lot of senior citizens are benefiting. There's single widow women out there, that are on a fixed income, and they're getting that credit back because they're using 1,000 gallons of water per month or 2,000 gallons, what have you. They will feel the effect of having that credit removed. And on our end, the city council's end as well, they wanted to ensure that those individuals weren't negatively affected, because for those individuals, any shift as far as an amount of money that's taken away on a monthly basis, even if it's $2, $3, or $4, they feel that. And I'm glad that the City Council recognized that and wanted to make sure that was properly addressed. And I feel that with this program, we did that.
Is there any concern by either one of you? Right now, we are relatively flush with water. I mean, our lakes are higher than they've been in decades. We're expanding the Hickory Well Field. We are in pursuit of the Concho River Water Project. And so we may never have been in such a strong position when it comes to water. Is there any concern by either of you that we may get a little lax in the mindset that you talked about earlier, Daniel, where people are really mindful of their water usage and of being conservative in how much water that they're using?
We have looked at the numbers today, actually, and I did thank the citizens for that conservation mentality, and they've maintained that. We all have. But we have seen that creep up this past year because there was additional rains. We know that as far as Lake Ivy, which is our primary source of water, that is creeping up towards 60% capacity right now, which is incredible. And we look at our lakes, and they're at the highest level that they've been in some cases in decades. So we do understand that we do have water, but we also understand that we're still living in a dry and arid area where we're still considered in a drought situation. And on our part, we need to make sure that we continue conserving, even though we have seen the numbers tick back up again. We do again appeal to our citizens to just keep that mentality and make sure that we continue conserving, and let's not get lax because we do have water in our lakes. We still need to start and continue planning for the future. These projects that we've talked about in the past, whether it's the Concho River Water Supply Project and the expansion of the Hickory Aquifer, those will give us water that will at least get us to the year 2070, 50 years down the road. We want to make sure that we continue planning for that because we never know what could happen. I mean, we could go through another dry spell like we had in 2011, 2012, and we want to make sure that we're addressing that we're doing this very responsibly. So yes, we are moving forward, but we do ask our citizens to still continue with that conservation mentality.
Councilman, I sense that there's been almost a culture change here when it comes to water, and that people are just very conservative about how much that they use.
Well, I think they are. And if you look at the numbers over the last 4 or 5 years, people are very cognizant of the fact that they need to be conserving water. Of course, most of the people that live in this particular area remember 2011, 2012, which were very, very dry. I've lived here since 1967, and it's probably the driest years I have ever seen. The bottom line is that we need to continue down that path of conservation. I'm fulfilling a campaign promise that I made 3 years ago. My granddaughters are 7 and 10, and I said that what I needed to do was to make sure that they had water for their grandchildren. So with this new plan that we've got in place, with the Concho River plan and the Hickory and the water in Ivy, right now we're headed in that direction. As Daniel said, this plan will take us to 2070. That gets me to where I need to be. That gets my granddaughters, grandchildren to where they need to be. And I think that's the key thing. We just continue to look at conservation. We live on the edge of a desert. When I'm having conversation with people in the community, I remind them of that. We are very, very blessed in the last 2 or 3 years to have the water we've had. Good Lord, let it rain, and I suspect that He's going to let it rain again. But the bottom line is we got to be cognizant of the fact of where we live, and we got to be doing everything we can from a conservation level.
One last question about this. We want to encourage conservation, but there's also a balancing act that has to occur, and that we've got to generate revenue in order to support the water utilities. How do you find that balance, Daniel?
It's very difficult, and we talked a little bit about that today. We do want people to conserve their water, but we also know that they have a need for water. So it's that need for water that allows us to stay in that revenue area. We do want them to be careful, our citizens to be careful how much they're using. Let's not go crazy knowing that we do have more water in our lakes. But use the water that you need to use and use it responsibly, and that does help our revenues. We always keep that in mind, and I keep that in mind today too. Sometimes we tend to want to set goals that are really stringent, and all of a sudden we start pushing and pushing for a conservation level that does not allow the city to really maintain its infrastructure. You have to keep in mind, as those revenues come in, we're replacing that infrastructure and ensuring again that future projects are addressed, and the way that we do that is with the revenues that come in. So it is a tricky balancing act, but it's something that we have to do, and we have to be smart about how we do it.
Well, speaking of money, one of the other big issues that you guys addressed today were user charges, fees for services that people tap into that are provided by the city. And it's sort of an interesting philosophy about what should the level of fees be in regards to the cost of the service provided. Talk a little bit about that, Daniel. Where's that balancing act?
You know, we have some major challenges, especially this year with what we've seen, what we witnessed with our state legislators back in session again. And one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that there's always a chance that the revenues that we currently depend on may go away. The city is not dependent on revenues from the state. We get very little from the state, and sometimes we do get some monies in the form of grants. But this year, as the legislators went into session, they addressed two areas which actually affect three of our biggest revenue sources. We have property tax revenues, we have our franchise fees, and we have our sales tax revenues. Well, there's a couple of bills, a few bills that were passed that really address our ability to earn those revenues that come in for our property tax revenues and also our franchise fees. Just on our franchise fees, we stand, if everything passes the way that we think it will, our franchise fees will be affected to the tune of as high as $500,000 a year. Keeping that in mind, we know that we have other revenue sources that we should be addressing. Some of those are user fees. Those customers that come in and use the services of the city that actually benefits them or their business, they should pay that user fee. And we want to make sure that what we're charging on those user fees actually covers the cost of the city providing those services. And that's what we addressed today at City Council, and I'm really proud that the City Council members addressed it as we need to get to a point where we're at 100% and covering all our costs. Because right now, we've had situations in the past with past City Council members, past administration, that let some of those fees get far behind. And what that happens is we don't just want to overnight adjust those fees to 100%, because that really is a sticker shock for the citizens that are using those services. One day they're at $20, the next day they're at $40. So we don't want that. So we want to do it responsibly again and phase it in and make sure that, as the City Council addressed today, do it over a 3-year period and get us up to the 100% of the cost of providing that service. So again, we're making some headway there. We want to make sure that we're addressing our revenues, but we're doing it again responsibly. We don't want our citizens through our property tax revenues, our sales tax revenues, other revenues to come in to have to supplement some of those user fees because we're running short in those areas. So again, it's a responsible thing to do, and it's something that gained some momentum today, and I'm glad that we're approaching it from the perspective of we need to get to 100% of our costs associated with providing those services.
You know, Councilman, the city manager has been advocating this for a few years now, and I'd like to hear your thoughts as to why it's important that these services support themselves as opposed to being subsidized with tax dollars.
Well, you know, I think it's great when we have these services available for certain people in the community. But quite honestly, if I'm not building a house, if I'm not remodeling, why should I have to pay to supplement those things? And I hear that on a regular basis from a lot of citizens. So those individuals that utilize the city's services really need to be the ones that pay for those services. And we've got to do that at a rate while that we're recovering the cost of what that service costs. And I think because we were so short-sighted in the past that we've got to get to that spot where we are. And I think we took a large step today by saying in 3 years we want to be there. And most of our fees we're going to allow us to be at 100% of the cost of that particular service in 3 years. So what we've laid out today were a number of fees that we increased, but we also gave direction to the staff to say, hey, lay these out. When you come back next year, let's see, okay, this is where we're going to be. And so we've got that goal at 100% in the 3-year period. And I think we're going to get there.
You know, when you use tax dollars in order to subsidize some of these services, I think people sometimes lose sight of the fact that those are tax dollars that then cannot be spent on streets or public safety
Absolutely.
or parks, you know, the other services that are provided by taxes.
Yes, and right now, when we look at our infrastructure, we are behind the 8 ball. There's a lot of deferred maintenance that happened in the past, and we're trying to play catch up now. And there's a lot of needs, and trust me, when the citizens call us and tell us, you know, we have potholes, we have certain streets that need to be done, we've heard you, and we're planning for that, and we want to make sure that we address that. We're behind, and we want to make that up as much as we can. But we shouldn't have to be supplementing, or as you mentioned a while ago, basically we are giving money to those other services that we shouldn't have to. Let's use those monies. Let's not stop subsidizing. Let's use those monies toward those infrastructure improvements that are much needed in our community.
You mentioned that this will occur over a 3-year period where the fee will catch up to the cost of providing the service. So is the plan now to start sort of a 3-year review of fees just to make sure we don't fall behind like we have in the past?
I think so. I think that as we look at how we're going to be doing this as a council and the staff as well, we've gotten some good direction, and hopefully we move toward the point where we have some adjustments that are made because we know this is the cost of providing a service. And mind you, when we say a cost of providing a service, we as a staff keep in mind that we need to be as efficient as we possibly can, that those costs for providing service don't balloon because we're being inefficient. So we're monitoring that, and we're looking at, okay, what goes into this cost of providing the service? And we want to make sure that we're bringing it down to the lowest level possible because we're being as efficient as possible. So again, on our end, we want to make sure that we take a closer look at that and we do it responsibly.
And so, Councilman, would your expectation be that you see, obviously you didn't address every fee that the city charges today, you only saw a small portion of those. Would you anticipate seeing different fees each year so that you can review where they are in relation to the cost and what it's going to take to raise them up to the cost of the service?
Well, I think between now and the end of the fiscal year, we will see some additional fees that come before the council. And I think the direction from the council will be the exact same thing that we gave the staff today. Bring it to us in increments so that we know in 3 years we can get to that 100% cost of that particular thing. I think it's key that we continue to do that. I think the other thing side of it is the users of those particular services then have an idea of what it's going to cost. So as Daniel said, we don't want to take a $20 fee today and make it a $100 fee tomorrow. We want to incrementally get to that particular spot. And I think all of the people, including the builders, and we spent sufficient time, really a lot more time than I would have anticipated, working with the Builders Association, so that we could get with them and tell them exactly what we were doing. We took their input and we got to a spot where we'll be able to move things forward. We did the same thing with the fire department and on their fees, and did the same thing with planning. So we are going to be able to do this on a regular basis. My hope is that we get to 100%, and then we do, as you say, review those every 2 or 3 years so that we're not reviewing every fee every year. I think it becomes burdensome not only to the council, but also for the citizens and those people that use the fees.
We've been talking with Daniel Valenzuela. He is the city manager for the city of San Angelo, and District 3 Councilman Harry Thomas, who also today was elected as our Mayor Pro Tem. The council next meets on May the 21st, and after that meeting, tune into our Facebook page where we'll be catching up with the council.